The Good Reading Podcast is brought to you by Luxury, the monthly book subscription that pairs a new release book with a pampering gift delivered to your door. There are new books every month and 9 genres to choose from. Why not spoil yourself or give the gift of a Luxury subscription today? Visit luxury.com.au to find out how.
Steering his way through the crowd, Bailey walked past the row of temporary chairs where he was supposed to be seated so that he could keep filming faces. If he was going to write about Augustus Strong, he needed to know about the people who had paid to hear him speak, how far the tentacles of the alt-right movement had spread in Australia. Checking that he wasn't being watched, he stopped the video and activated the voice memo app, beginning an audio recording before slipping his phone back inside his jacket. "Best keep that phone in there, mate." A bloke in a sharp suit and a fashy haircut was backing into the empty seat beside Bailey, pointing at his jacket. "Heard the Blue Boys belted some guy for taking pictures at Strong's talk in Melbourne the other night. Ended up in hospital. All media's the same these days. Leftist mafia, out of touch. No idea what real people want, what we think. We." Bailey had met his first real person for the night. "Tell me about it," Bailey said. "World's going to shit. Thank God for truth tellers like Augustus Strong, eh? Amen to that."
Hello and welcome to the Good Reading Podcast. My name's Greg Dobbs. Tim Ayliffe has been a journalist for more than 20 years and is currently managing editor of television and video for ABC News and former executive producer of ABC News Breakfast. He is the author of 2 previous works of fiction, including The Greater Good and State of Fear. Today I'm talking to Tim about his latest crime thriller, The Enemy Within. It's the 3rd in a series of crime fiction with John Bailey as the hard-living, hard-drinking international correspondent and investigative reporter. Tim, welcome to the Good Reading Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Greg. Good to be here.
So John Bailey, he does own a computer and a mobile phone, but he's definitely old school when it comes to his work. He flags down a taxi rather than booking an Uber, and he takes notes in his own secret shorthand. Are Bailey's old-fashioned values and approach to journalism still relevant and effective in today's digital world?
All the principles that Bailey believes in as a journalist hold true today for what is good journalism. He's off the booze, of course, in this book, and he was fighting it in the last. But for him, he's the kind of journalist that, knocks on doors, asks lots of questions, picks up the phone, does things in many ways the old-fashioned way to sort of chase what's most important for him in journalism, that's chasing the truth. He's deeply suspicious about social media as a news gathering tool. There are many journalists like this. It's not just a job for him, it's a craft. And that's why, you'll find with a lot of crime fiction, you've got private investigators, you've got cops, and you've got journalists, because they all share that one thing in common, which is chasing justice, chasing the truth, and often being dogged in their determination to find it.
John Bailey is this investigative reporter in search of the truth. He's also a bit of a victim at the same time.
Look, Bailey's a bit reckless. And I think, his backstory is a war reporter that, sacrificed his normal life to continue just to chase his job as a journalist. And back then it was, reporting, on wars in the Middle East. And that's where the real hard drinking started for him, because it was a way for him to deal with his demons. And I've tried to develop and grow the character in that, yes, he is a bit of a dysfunctional human being, but he's actually chosen life. Like, he wants to live. So he's off the booze. He's been through AA, talked to all the shrinks. None of that stuff really worked for him. It was a conscious choice he had to arrive to himself in the end, which was that if you want to be, the person that you want to be, if you want to be someone who's positively contributing to life, being able to do his job, reconnecting with his daughter, having relationships, then the booze had to go. His obsession with finding the truth often leads him into hairy situations, but that for him sort of comes with the territory. He wants to be the guy that tells those stories, breaks news, and exposes bad people. Oh, look, he's a likable guy. He's a bit grumpy. But at the end of the day, he's just going to annoy a lot of people along the way. But he's also someone who really believes passionately what he does. And look, the most important thing for me is that I tell these sort of gripping, page-turning books for him to come alive in. So hopefully that's what I've done with The Enemy Within.
Part of the way you build John Bailey's character is firstly through his experience, his trauma, his PTSD that's a relic of his past. But do you seek to build his character through his relationships with other characters in the book?
There's another really important character in this book that I think it does help to explain Bailey with this other character. Annie Brooks is her name, and she was a war correspondent like Bailey as well. And they had a relationship way back when in Beirut in the 90s. And they've reconnected in the previous book, actually, but in this book even more so, because she's very much like Bailey in that she is very devoted to the craft of journalism. She's working for a commercial TV station, and she's dealt with all the kind of crap that a lot of women did in working in that sort of environment for the years in which she was. And Bailey and her kind of connect on a level whereby they really understand each other. They've both got problems with the booze. They're both obsessed with chasing down the story. So I chose to tell a lot of, or part of this story from her point of view as well, because I don't just want to explain Bailey's character through some other big characters like Annie Brooks. I want to explain the story through that and how the story is impacting not just Bailey but the people around him as well. So the threat that other people may face in investigating the sort of racist-led attacks that we're seeing in Sydney in the story, the white supremacist movement that's threatening. But then also it gave me a way to cover this looming issue that Bailey's got with the Australian Federal Police. So Annie's there as her own character in chasing this story as well, and in very much hers and Bailey's worlds collide in this book in good and bad ways.
One of the main themes of the book is this rise of white supremacy and racism in general, and you explore that quite thoroughly in The Enemy Within. And the plot, I guess, charts a course that is, I guess, increasingly familiar to what we hear and read every day in the news cycle. Does your work as a journalist drive your fiction writing in some way, or are they separate worlds for you?
My day job is like research for my books. But I think this book, even more so than the others that I've written, is probably closer to the truth. And I've got two main plot lines running in this. And the first one I'll just sort of talk to you about in that where the idea came from. So in June 2019, a bunch of AFP officers walked into the ABC, raided the ABC with an extraordinarily powerful search warrant that enabled them to not only dive into all of our computers and search this huge list of keywords that they were allowed to search, it enabled them to alter and even delete our files. And I thought that is an extraordinary power and deeply concerning for not only journalists, but for people. If authorities are able to go in and delete our files, then that has some significant implications for the ability of media to be able to do our job. So that was one thing. And then there's this rise of far-right nationalism. We've got far-right nationalist leaders in half a dozen countries or more around the world right now, huge countries. We've seen, in the United States, how a large group of disaffected Americans, angry about their lot in life behind a more populist leader in Donald Trump. And from that, we saw other splinter groups come out. You had leaders that are effectively offering very simple solutions to very complex problems, winning support around the world. And that's what we've seen. So those two big issues for me: abuse of power. What happens if that warrant that was used to raid the ABC, what happens if that kind of power fell into the hands of the wrong person? And at the same time, Bailey investigating far-right nationalism, white supremacist movement, and how interconnected it now is, with people sitting in little dark rooms all around the world, connecting with each other, making them feel like they're part of something much bigger. That was really sort of interesting for me to explore in terms of a crime thriller.
I often wonder whether John Bailey or people like John Bailey are the only people standing between us and, I guess, the end of the world as we know it.
Well, if you just look at the pillars of democracy, like what makes democracy work, you need a free and strong media, laws that are fair. So I see so many different, areas whereby you could find people with important roles to play. And look, the media was a natural place for me to try to tell this story or to build a character from. So John Bailey's a construct, of course. He's not based on anyone in particular, but he's certainly based on a lot of the things that I've seen and the people that I know and have worked with over the years. So I think that he's just in a good position to be able to kind of tell that story. And I think really good crime fiction shines lights into dark places. We don't always want to see too deeply into these places, but what we want to see at the end of it is a glimpse of light so that you know that, okay, this bad stuff is out there, but we're going to be okay.
Picking up on what you just said, does crime fiction and fiction in general have a role to play in understanding things like conspiracy theories and the way the media can manipulate those?
Well, I mean, what I try to do with my books, and with this one in particular, what I've tried to do with The Enemy Within is put all the lay it like a puzzle, put all the pieces out there that give you, once you've got to the end of the book, a thorough understanding, I think, of these issues that I'm looking at in the media in terms of far-right nationalism, white supremacists as well. I don't know that it's necessarily my job as a writer to tell people what to think. I think it's giving them the information to allow them to make up their own mind. So, I'm really careful that I, don't want to use my books in a way to kind of preach. But what I do want to do is I want to show the good and the bad sides of power and misinformation. People that don't take that responsibility seriously around the power of giving someone a voice that actually, and this may sound controversial too, but not everyone gets to stand up and do a television interview to tell us their opinion on something, whether we're talking about, the pandemic that we're living through right now or other issues. I mean, not everyone gets to be given that platform, but unfortunately, with social media, they take that platform. They don't necessarily need to ask for it anymore. They just take that platform. They don't need to be given it. And if they get some traction out there, it doesn't matter what they're saying, they may find supporters that agree with them. And that's what I was saying earlier around there's a responsibility that I think is starting to be taken a bit more seriously around some of those big social media companies, particularly around what they put on their platform and what they allow on their platform. But for a long time there, it was just like the Wild West. So I think we have seen a little bit of a snapback and a greater respect for the power of the media. And I actually hope that continues, because journalism, from where I come from, it's a craft. At the ABC, we've got strict editorial policies that we adhere to. You do not publish a story until you've got all the facts in there. And I think that 24-hour news cycle and social media has made that sort of fact-checking a bit more difficult for everyone. But I think if we just slow down a little bit, the truth will be easier to find.
And that seems to me exactly what your character, John Bailey, is doing. He doesn't seem to be a character in search of headlines.
At the end of the day, he's a journalist who's chasing facts and telling stories. He loves breaking news stories. Don't get me wrong. He loves front page stories as well. Like any journalist, that's what he wants. But he just wants to have impact and to tell the truth.
Your previous book, The Greater Good, brought John Bailey back to Sydney. He's still recovering from his time as an international correspondent in the Middle East. But in The Enemy Within, we find John Bailey still coming to terms with his past. So I've got to ask you, where does the arc of John Bailey's life and career go from here?
Well, I think Bailey has really rediscovered his mojo as an investigative journalist. So he's going to continue to keep chasing stories and probably finding himself get caught up in the middle of them. I'm really interested in the spy game in Australia at the moment. There are more foreign spies inside Australia right now than there's ever been at any point in history. So Bailey might have a dig into what the Russians are up to.
Well, I look forward to that. So, Tim, thanks very much for joining me on the Good Reading Podcast.
Really enjoyed talking to you, Greg. Thanks.
I've been talking to Tim Ayliffe about his latest crime thriller, The Enemy Within. It's published by Simon & Schuster and is available at goodreadingmagazine.com.au. This is Greg Dobbs for the Good Reading Podcast, and thanks for listening. This Good Reading Podcast was brought to you by LuxuryRead. Why not spoil yourself or give the gift of a LuxuryRead subscription today? Visit luxuryread.com.au to find out how.